Okay, welcome back. Dividing real numbers. So I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to think about this. And whatever way works for you is fine, but if you think about dividing as multiplying by the reciprocal, then you don't ever get confused by dividing fractions. That's where people tend to really struggle. So 8 divided by negative 2 is the same as 8 times negative 1 over 2. So multiplying by the reciprocal of negative 2, which is negative 1/2. So I can think of this both ways. 8 divided by 2, or 8 times negative 1/2. Sorry, just 8 times 1/2. We know my answer is going to be negative, and 8 divided by 2 is 4. And I can always just check that on my calculator. And I know that my answer is going to be negative. So the reason I'm showing you this method is because when it comes to fractions, people tend to get really confused. So I need to rewrite this as a multiplication problem. So negative 3/4, first one always stays the same. And then I'm multiplying by the reciprocal of negative 5/9, which is negative 9 over 5. So I know negative times negative, my answer is going to be positive. And I'm going to run out of room going down, so I'm going to go sideways here. 3 times 9 is 27. 4 times 5 is 20. 27 and 20 do not have a common factor, so I can't reduce that at all. So this is my answer, 27 over 20, and I'm just going to leave it as a fraction. 20.8 divided by 4, negative 20.8 divided by 4, is the same as 20.8 times 1/4. Negative 20.8 times 1/4. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the calculator for this one. Whoops, not 200. 20.8 divided by 4 is 5.2. And if you also look at that as times parentheses 1 divided by 4, you're also going to get 5.2. Now, I also know this is a negative times positive, so my answer is going to be negative 5.2. 0 divided by 7, 0 divided by anything is going to give me 0. Now, I do want to point out that is not the same as 7 divided by 0. If you check this on the calculator, 0 divided by 7, simply 0. 7 divided by 0, you get an error because you cannot, in math, you can't divide by 0. And if you think about that realistically speaking, if you divide by 2, you're dividing something into 2 equal parts. If you divide by 0, you're dividing it into 0 equal parts, and that doesn't really make sense. So remember that this is undefined, and we'll talk more about it another time, but make sure you understand that 0 divided by number is always 0, but anything divided by 0 is not a real answer, or not an answer. So simplifying algebraic expressions, we do this the same as we did when we were adding and subtracting. We want to multiply using the distributive property and then simplify by adding our like terms. So 2 times 3x, we're only multiplying across here, so those parentheses, according to the associative property, don't mean anything, so we can drop those away. So 2 times 3 is 6, times x is 6x. 6x plus x, we have like terms there. Remember, this is the same as 6x plus 1x, so 6 plus 1 is 7. On part C, we need to distribute that negative 3 and make sure you recognize it's a negative 3. So negative 3 times 2x is negative 6x. Negative 3 times negative 5 is a positive 15, so this is going to be plus 15. So that's our answer because we can't combine anything there because 15 has no x. When we look at this one, negative parentheses 3y minus 8, a negative outside of the parentheses is essentially distributing a negative 1. A negative 1 times 3y is a negative 3y, and a negative 1 times a negative 8 is a positive 8. So basically a negative out in front of the parentheses changes everything in this inside the parentheses to its opposite. This is a positive 3y, it's now a negative 3y. This is a negative 8, it's now a positive 8. So because I don't have any like terms, I can't combine anything or simplify any further. That's as far as I can go. Finally, determine whether negative 3 is a solution to 2x minus 5 plus 8x, equals 8x plus 7. So I'm going to substitute negative 3 in for my two x's. So I have 2 parentheses negative 3, or 2 times negative 3 minus 5 equals 8 times negative 3 plus 7. Notice I just dropped down my equal sign, my minus 5, my plus 7, the 2, and the 8. The only thing I changed is I took out the x and I put in negative 3. So now I need to multiply first. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6 minus 5. Remember, I'm just dropping that down because I didn't use it yet. 8 times negative 3 is negative 24. Drop down the plus 7. Negative 6 plus negative 5, or negative 6 minus 5, is negative 11. Negative 24 plus 7, the difference between 24 and 7, so 24 minus 7 is 17. So because 24 is the bigger number and it's negative, this is negative 17. So no, this is not a solution. So I want to recap how to deal with these negatives and positives. I want you guys to understand why these things work more than the rules, because it's easier if you understand how they work. It's much easier to remember them. But I also want to sum up and make sure we're clear. If you are adding, we'll go down that column first, and we have both positive numbers, our answer is going to be positive. If I'm adding and I have a positive and a negative number, then it depends on which is bigger. It could be either, depending on which has the greater absolute value. If they're both negative, your answer is going to be negative. That's when we are adding. If we are subtracting and and both terms are positive, that can be either as well. So depending on which is greater. If I am subtracting a positive and a negative, again, that can be either. Depending on which is greater. and which is being subtracted. So if I have if I have 8 minus a negative 2, here when we're subtracting a negative, that means we're adding. So this is actually 8 plus 2, which is 10. If I have negative 8 minus a positive 2, then that's going to give me a negative 10 because that's negative 8 plus a negative 2 essentially, so that's negative 10. So you have to be careful about where those are. That's why the rules when it comes to adding and subtracting are a little bit trickier, and it's better to understand how they actually work. If both numbers are negative, whoops, we already have that written. If both are negative, once again, this is either. And again, that depends on which is greater. So if I have negative 8 minus a negative 2, that's negative 8 plus 2, which is, here, I'll rewrite that, which is negative 6. On the other hand, so that's one example, if I have negative 2 minus negative 8, that's the same as negative 2 plus 8, which ends up giving me a positive 6. So it really just depends on the order and which one is bigger. So you have to be very careful when you are subtracting negatives. Adding negatives is fairly straightforward, except when you get into the positive and the negative. Multiplying and dividing is much more straightforward. If you're multiplying and you have both positive, that answer is positive. If you're multiplying and you have a positive and a negative, that is negative. If they're both negative, that's a positive. It's exactly the same with dividing. If you're dividing a positive by a positive, your answer is positive. If you are dividing a positive by a negative or a negative divided by a positive, your answer is negative. And if you are dividing a negative by a negative, your answer is positive. So while addition and subtraction have a lot of depends on the numbers, multiplication and division is very straightforward. So that's it for section 1.7. So I need to assign you your homework. Hang on just a moment. Okay, so your homework is numbers 15 through 29, 35 through 40, 50 through 55, 65 to 70, and then 85 to 91 odd, and 99 and 100. This might seem like a lot, but on a lot of these you're simply doing a one-step thing, so don't panic about it. So I'll show you the book here. So we have 15 through 29. Should check that. 35 through 40, finding the multiplicative inverse. Make sure you're reading the instructions on 15 through 29. You're just multiplying, getting your answer. And then 50 through 55, performing the division. And then 65 to 70, again, dividing. So you're right here. Once again, do not skip those fraction problems. 85 through 91. So you're down here simplifying the algebraic expression. And then up here, continuing to simplify, and then down here, 99 to 100. So there you go. Pause where you need to have those questions, to do those problems. And then we are down to one more section in chapter 1, and then we'll be done with chapter 1.